focus. This you'll need if you are starting your career focus. If you are in high school or in college, come and hear the skills, the roles and goals you need to know to keep yourself focused.
Hello everyone, and welcome to a new episode of Career Focus, part of Influential Future. Today is my guest. I have Guillermo Malena. He's co-founder of a startup, Allie, based in New York. He has a very extensive background as a product manager, working for very famous companies such as Bloomberg, and his background initially is as a mechanical engineer from Cornell University, but I'll let him give us a brief overview. Hi, Guillermo. Thank you for taking the time.
Hi, Alex. Thank you for inviting me.
No, you're most welcome. So, Guillermo, let's kick it off. Can you give us a brief overview about yourself?
Yeah, so graduated from Cornell about 10 years ago from mechanical engineering. From there, I was born and raised in the city, so I decided I wanted to stay in the city and not work for like an engineering company in like Texas or something like that. So I worked at Bloomberg for the next 7 years. Began in like technical support, then made my way to the analytics desk, then pivoted to sales, and then pivoted to product management. So I had a very wide career at Bloomberg. Then after that, I decided to work at a early stage startup called SigTech that effectively sold Python SaaS solution to hedge funds for quant back testing. And I was one of their senior product managers here in New York, but they're based in London. And in 2024, decided to quit my job and just go full into entrepreneurship. My first startup, Avanzai, was initially like AI for creating charts, visualizations, meshing data, combining data. And then got together with my best friend earlier this year. So I open sourced Avanzai and then started collaborating with my best friend who is a former investment banker from Goldman turned commercial real estate developer and started building an AI tool for fellow commercial real estate developers, and that's Allie. So that's what we're working on currently.
That sounds fantastic. Thank you. Thank you for the intro, Guillermo. So let's do a little bit of a deep dive. So obviously, early career decision. What options were on the table, and how did you choose? Did you actually want to pursue mechanical engineering as a full-time career, or you were like, I did this is my education, but I'm not too sure I want to do it as a full-time job. Maybe what else should I do?
So mechanical engineering was definitely it was the first declared major I had at Cornell. Looking back on it, I wish I would have realized that there's not as many jobs in New York City as compared to, let's say, like Illinois, Indiana, Texas. Obviously, the defense industry, cars, et cetera, Michigan. So I didn't want to leave the city, and kind of like the way I thought about it was, okay, let me use this engineering degree to potentially get like a finance job.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I stumbled upon Bloomberg. So that's how that happened.
Very interesting. And initially, was it a conscious decision you wanted to do mechanical engineering? Like, because obviously, I presume you like things that you try to figure out how things work, how to build things. Is that why you decided to do mechanical engineering as a degree?
For sure, yeah. I always wanted to be an aerospace engineer. Cornell was unique in the sense that the mechanical and aerospace engineering program were combined, so it was MAE.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I realized, I was in college 2011, 2015. Whoever didn't want to be in SpaceX back then it was like the cool thing to aspire to join. Until I realized you kind of needed like a 3.9 GPA, and I did not have a 3.9 GPA. Most of my friends ended up working at like defense contractors. But obviously I do have a couple friends that ended up working at SpaceX. So I kind of realized my talents and what I'm good at, and I know I'm very good at problem solving skills, and I finished my mechanical engineering degree. But I'm like, you know what? Let me apply this to finance, since one, it's in the city. That was the main thing I wanted to focus on, and two, I didn't want to necessarily work in defense. Like I either wanted SpaceX or bust, and I couldn't get SpaceX, so I'm like, let me I guess work for finance. So yeah.
Yeah, obviously, this is the thing with career. You obviously have that. So sometimes this is the difficult part. When you finish university, it's very difficult to understand the practical applications of your degree. And it's nice to see that at least in your case, you decide, okay, I didn't get this thing. I gonna give this thing a go. and obviously you understood very well what your strengths are and how to apply them. So obviously, this is where I'm pivoting to my next question. So obviously, you went to Bloomberg, you became a product manager. So why did you choose to become a product manager over the other tracks that you've tried within the company? And what did you think that because you had this mechanical background, it gave you actually an unfair advantage?
So the unfortunate thing about being someone who's interested or has skill sets in a lot of things is that it's very hard to get really good. Like I never really aspired to have a PhD in something, for example, because I knew that like, very extroverted. I like talking to people, but I also I've always had a very technical background, studied engineering. I've always been really good at math and science. But I also didn't want to be an engineer per se in the sense of like a coding engineer, like just spending 12 hours a day just coding. So that explains like the shift in Bloomberg, right? Like I started in technical support. I was what was called like an API specialist.
Mm-hmm.
So if anyone in finance is watching this podcast, the guy who would help you troubleshoot your Excel spreadsheets, the equal BLP formulas, basically like I was the subject matter expert with that. Then I transferred into the analytics desk, which is the help desk within Bloomberg. And again, like I focused on fixed income, and then eventually fixed income derivatives within that desk. And frankly, again, that's the technical side of me. Like interest rate swaps is the closest thing I could find within analytics that felt very close to like the math and science I was doing in engineering. And then the pivot to sales, frankly, was just like trying to train another muscle. So I trained the technical muscle. I became an advanced specialist, and which effectively just means that you're like the highest subject matter expert internally for that asset class. And then pivoted to sales, frankly, just because I wanted to get to actually meet clients. Like, how you
Mm-hmm.
guys are using Bloomberg? Who are our competitors? What's the industry like? Like, that sort of thing, and getting to see their day-to-day workflow. And that was about 2 years, but unfortunately, that was also during the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I knew that my end goal was always, so I always wanted to be an entrepreneur. My second concentration um, within Cornell was an entrepreneurship one. And that
Mm-hmm.
basically effectively just allowed me to take a ton of finance courses,
Yes.
like accounting, finance 101, derivatives, etc. So fast forward to 2020 when I decided to get into product management, I knew that I viewed it as like my my graduation ceremony in terms of like before becoming an entrepreneur. As you recall, like late 2010s, it was very normal for like if you weren't a software engineer in tech, you would likely be a product manager in order to eventually found your own company. So thankfully, my manager, 100% backed me up on it. I did a product school certificate that summer 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a very close relationship with one of the product managers as a sales rep with one of the product managers within Bloomberg data team. And he kind of told me one day, he was like, hey, why don't you apply? And I'm like, oh, like for context, like, for anyone viewing, and I'm sure all big organizations are like this, like transferring is considered like kind of like getting a passport. It's like, oh, you need a visa to travel to, XYZ place. So transferring to product management was kind of like, oh, okay. Obviously, it was very much incentivized, but it was also something where like you're kind of going away like the usual path. So, yeah, I applied. I thought I couldn't apply, but he obviously encouraged me to do so. My manager obviously was behind, supporting me as well. And thankfully, I transferred to product management and had not only management, but also like had like a mentor during that process that definitely helped me, understand the, sprints and knowing how to learn, use Jira and a whole bunch of tools and what to do during stand up and how to not be a bad product manager. So that was super helpful.
No, that's fantastic. At least you had the support from your immediate manager and obviously other people across the organization that actually allowed you to do the transition. But obviously, I presume it also gave you the skill set later on when you decide to cross the chasm from the corporate to the founder world. So when was the actual moment that you actually clicked for you that this is actually the risk I've always wanted to take? So it's now is the right time to actually approach it and take the leap.
So I've always had like side projects throughout most of my career. When I was in sales, funny enough, a week into sales, I told my manager that I was finishing up an album and if I can get a week off just to like master the album that I was working on because I wanted to release it on Spotify. And that was on Spotify, but I eventually took it down. When I was in product management and I shifted from working at Bloomberg to working at SigTech, I had a data analytics like kind of social media page called Kasi Kasgo, where basically I would analyze a lot of think of very similar to like Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg Analytics, like here are the shifts of like red and blue voters in New York from 2016 to 2020, et cetera, that sort of thing. So that project I actually shut down summer 2022, and I think Dolly 2 had just come out, Dolly 1 or
Mhm.
Dolly 2. And I heard about this company called OpenAI, and I'm like, damn, this sounds like they're doing something really cool. And then I stumble upon GPT-3 that
Mm.
summer, and I basically build the first iteration of eventually what was going to become my first startup, Avanzai, which basically was a fine-tuned model. And back then, fine-tuning GPT-3 model was basically just providing a whole bunch of examples and outputs into a batch, fine-tuned job through the API and then getting the results. I mean, sorry, and
Mhm.
then getting a fine-tuned model that you can access through the API. So yeah, that summer was when I started using it, and then I kind of basically put it on a whole bunch of AI directories, and it blew up. Like my costs, like the usual case of like someone who builds a tool and like they did not take into account AWS costs or Supabase or et cetera. Yeah, and it blew up. And that was when I kind of realized. Now, sorry, I missed a massive part. ChatGPT came out, so
Yeah.
I was working on it and building it. And your stereotypical go-to-market strategy, just let me have a wait list and then, how it was back in the day. And then ChatGPT comes out and I'm like, okay, let me just release it, put it on directories so as many people use as possible. But because ChatGPT blew up too, I guess by definition, all AI products got more visibility. And yeah, just that prompted me eventually to quit my job because I'm like, yeah, I want to work on this full time.
No, that's fantastic. And obviously, this is obviously the big problem when you're becoming a founder. Is there actually a market for my product? Because a lot of people, as probably you know full well, they build something, they've never actually did analysis on the market, and they get disappointed because customers say, "Oh, it looks cool, but maybe it's missing something." So this is it's nice to hear that at least in your case, you had a very positive experience. You built something that's you found useful for yourself, and other people found it as well. But obviously, like you mentioned, the downside is it can become too big of a problem because obviously, when you're launching your product for the first time, it can be tricky because obviously, like in your case, it blew up. So that's a nice problem to have, but obviously, it's one of the issues that you might get when you're starting to your own company. So obviously now you shifted from Upside, you actually started a new venture. Ali, do you want to give us a brief overview about Ali, what you're trying to solve?
Yeah, so Avanzai was basically English to charts that require Python code more complex than, plot me the S&P 500 price, right?
Yes.
So it would do things such as like factor exposure, et cetera, and those sort of things. I took basically that same IP and my best friend, like I mentioned before, ex Goldman, pivoted to commercial real estate, was kind of like, hey, why don't we just use that IP and specifically use it for commercial real estate? So parsing the data, extracting the data from wherever the user has it, whether it be a PDF, a spreadsheet, et cetera, and then basically help them build an underwriting model and then have outputs such as like a DEX or a memo, et cetera. And yeah, when he first approached me with the idea, I wasn't a massive believer till I exhausted enough Avanzai where I realized like, anyone really can build a tool with public data, but if you really are able to extract and join private and public data and, provide some deliverable for the user, whether it be like a memo or a PowerPoint deck, et cetera, then that's powerful. And yeah, that's when we joined forces.
Yes, it's also nice because you have actually, it sounds like complementary skill sets because obviously he knows the financial side very well. You obviously know the technical side very, very well. So it actually allows you to have a synergy to basically complement each other's skills. And obviously, it gives you some more traction with potential clients, I presume.
Yes. And he's my best friend of like all life. I've known him since I was 4 years old, so that definitely helps too.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Fantastic. So obviously, do you agree that sometimes it's actually useful to actually build stuff quicker and iterate quicker, or some is that some comes with a downside, you think?
I think speed and iteration is the ultimate moat, especially in this age of AI. I think unless your business has some form of proprietary data that sets you apart, the faster that you iterate and learn lessons and the faster that you fail, I think that is 100% the biggest moat.
Hmm.
An example of this is, for example, I built like an Excel parser for Allie. And effectively the Excel parser drag and drop any Excel file and it's able to like grab the corresponding data points to a certain mapped field. And then from there you can just like click a button and then it'll underwrite the rest of the model for you. The model must have gone through at least four different iterations, four different APIs, four different frameworks, four different completely new architectures to even use it. As you can imagine, like converting the spreadsheet to a PDF or literally going row by row, cell by cell, like mapping,
Yes.
you can imagine. So the faster you are able to do that, then I think the faster you're able to like provide a really good product for clients.
Hmm.
Especially when there are certain things that are just wild, wild west when it comes to building AI agents. Um, and that's just, like, I guess that's the beauty of it, right? Like, there are no rules with how to build certain workflows or certain tools. So the faster you iterate, then the faster you know, like sometimes the moat can be something as simple as like your biggest competitor chose the wrong path, but you chose the
Yes.
right path for the client. So for sure.
No, it makes a lot of sense because obviously there's many ways to solve a problem, but there's probably only a few ways that people can find it natural to interact with the software because obviously, and that's how people interact with the software, how they actually understand it, how they utilize it. So obviously, it's sometimes quite difficult because even experienced product managers struggle with it because if they shift one industry to another, it's nice to hear that at least in your case, even though you went through several iterations, like four, which is quite a lot, you finally found a way that actually works for you, but also for potential clients. And probably one of the things that I'm gonna ask you now is, what do you think is the best part of being an entrepreneur, and what do you think is the trade-off that most people actually underestimate because of that? Because I presume that being an entrepreneur is obviously not, it's unique in the sense of a career because there's no rules in such a way.
Yeah. Uh, the small best part, the most honest answer is like 11 a.m. walks,
Mm,
2 p.m. on a Thursday walks on a nice day.
mm,
And I say that jokingly, but seriously though, like being able to take time that is not structured and like walk away from your desk, especially like, if you're in a place where you can like go for like a nice walk is massive when it comes to mental health and just like being able to have the ability to be as um spend as much time as possible, like not burn yourself out effectively. But on a more serious place, like I think the greatest advantage is the sooner you understand that the capital and capitalism has to do with equity
mm,
and w- one, what that means, obviously, literally, in terms of, being a startup founder and having equity stake in the company that you're working on, but also in the ownership and the accountability of what you're working on. Like,
mhm.
there are no titles, there's no rule. Like, for example, when I worked with Ali, so Avanzai, I was obviously founder and CEO, but with Ali, I'm CTO, co-founder.
Yes.
And I told my best friend, like, I don't mind not having the CEO. Like, there are days when I effectively am the CEO, and there's days where I'm not the CEO. Like it's not like a title, um, battle. So that's like the best thing because, in a world where things are changing so much, frankly, titles are one of those things that are just washing away. Like I always tell folks that I don't like calling myself an engineer just because like I think true engineers are those that can build things that last thousands of years. I'm a builder. I hope what I build lasts thousands of years, but I'm not like a trained, I did go to college obviously for engineering, but my entire career wasn't like actual engineering, deploying production grade systems, etc. But as a product manager, I was obviously side by side learning how to do so. So
Yes.
Yeah, so like build engineer, builder, product manager, etc. Like these are all frankly just titles that with entrepreneurship you can wear all of them, none of them if you'd like. The biggest negative, and it's interesting since we're going to the holidays, is the con not it is actually a bit hard to realize just how much in the wilderness you are, if that makes sense. Like I would say entrepreneurship feels very much like you didn't check the weather and then you stepped outside for let's say like a walk or going to dinner and it's cold and windy. And you might have worn like a jacket or like a sweater, but you didn't realize just how windy and cold it is. So I mean that in regards to reaching out to folks to, join on their podcast or
Yes.
reaching out to folks to try out your product, to demo the product, investors to invest in your company. Like the stomach for no, I think most folks like have some level of like stomach for no, but like for doing that for years and even showing traction and still seeing no is definitely something where like and I mentioned the holidays because like the holidays in corporate America is very much like, I hope everything is well. Like, there's so much positivity, but sometimes it could just be like I have not closed any deals for the entire month or for the entire week or something like that.
Yes,
That's
yes, we also have that seasonal effect in Europe as well, definitely. But it's nice to hear, first of all, that you like the journey. Obviously, it's not without struggles, and you're fully aware of it. But to your point, I think these days job titles are illusionary because everybody has done things which are outside of their area of expertise in their job, pretty much. That's the nature of the dynamic world we live in. You have to be much more flexible to learn new skills and new tools very quickly to stay relevant because we both know technology is moving quite quickly the last
exactly.
20 years exponentially, and it's quite difficult to keep pace. And to that point, like obviously on a day-to-day basis, do you have favorite tools you like to use, like, and why do you like them?
Yes, so coding, I'm a Cursor boy. I love Cursor. I began using Cursor earlier this year. So I would say coding, definitely Cursor, GPT-5, or ChatGPT basically more for, I guess, like planning, email,
Yeah.
editing, that sort of thing, as you can imagine. Claude is definitely my preferred, if I don't want to use too many Cursor credits and I would like some agent to help me help code or anything like that, definitely Claude.
Hmm.
Granola for for taking meeting notes and summarizing them for sure. Uh, Perplexity as a guy who built an AI finance tool. If I had to name any company that I think is killing it in the space, it's Perplexity.
Perplexity.
And I'm sure
Hmm.
you're very well aware. Yeah, like Perplexity has access to just like earning call transcripts for free, all the fundamentals data, graphs, charts, etc., summarization, that sort of thing. Um, and frankly, Allie, yeah, like the tool that we're working on, a lot of the I personally am not like a ton into the commercial real estate space, like naturally, like as a hobby. But the overall real estate space, especially given, the election that's
Hmm.
happening in New York City and the overall like just real estate space in New York City, it is very common for me to just walk past by like an empty plot of land and just like take a picture, come back to Alley and just like pop it in. I'm like, okay, let's analyze this. So yeah.
No, it's very cool, especially actually I'm also a very big user in my case with Gemini. I think it's gotten a bit better compared to last year. I think it's actually a bit better also than Claude recently. But it's also very interesting that a lot of these big LLM companies are actually moving also to the financial space. I guess you've seen the news. ChatGPT has a team of 100 tax bankers trying to revolutionize investment banking. Claude launched a tool for financial services as well. But I think what they don't realize is it's quite difficult because technology, even though it's moved quite a lot in finance, everything is pretty much driven by Excel. And this is where there's a lot of manual work that comes into play, operational work. And I think there's going to be a very big shift because obviously Excel has been around for decades. These tools obviously have been around for a few years. I think it's going to be very interesting to see whether they can actually become part of the Excel framework or completely replace it. I think this is where we're at this point because obviously with all this technology, we have to decide how we're going to use it. It's the end of the day. And I think it's going to be very interesting to see how things develop.
Yeah, the two incumbents, the three incumbents, frankly, that I think will ultimately get the last laugh in all of these in the AI space. Google for sure with the browser wars. I'm
Yes,
not downloading a new browser. Like I know I'm not. I love AI, cool. I love Perplexity for finance.
yes,
I am not downloading a new browser. When Gemini is integrated natively in Chrome, now I'll use the chat functionality. But till then, in the same vein, I think in finance, the cornerstone of every single person, but 90% of folks in finance
yes,
is getting data, analyzing that data in Excel, and presenting that data in a deck. And obviously, Microsoft owns effectively all three, but let's say the last two. Yeah, I think Microsoft, whenever their Copilot, I know their agent mode is very good.
yeah.
But whenever they can have Copilot have an integrated Excel PowerPoint solution that's very straightforward and you can get data from wherever you'd like, I think it will be a no-brainer.
Mm,
History, however, says that that's not necessarily guaranteed because
no.
GitHub Copilot is not as powerful as Cursor and Lovable and Bolt, right? So
Mm,
who knows? And they obviously own GitHub and VS Code.
yes,
So no.
exactly. We'll have to wait
And
and see it.
correct, yeah. Yeah.
So in your case, do you prefer to build things from scratch? Do you prefer to buy stuff, or do you like no code better? Like any, do you have a preference?
So, just for the sake of the question, is it building like anything or is it like features specifically?
Let's say
Um,
features, for example, because it's easier to discern. Yeah.
I think it depends. It's a very good question because it depends on the expectation of the user. So, for
Yes.
example, um, Perplexity has an API called Sonar, and Sonar is very good at getting web search. Obviously, the biggest competitor is Exa, which is another AI company. Um, and then there's like, several other tools like Tavili, etc. I am not going to build a deep research agent from scratch. I'm going to
No,
plug
of
and play
course.
this API and we're good to go. So in that sense, usually things like that, like if I know that it's obvious that I should have a PDF parser and there's a tool that is a very good PDF parser and it's just plug and play, for the sake of time, I'll just use that tool, whether it be Reducto or
Hmm.
Llama Parse is like a cloud-based PDF parser.
Hmm.
Then those definitely. But obviously, once users are like, hey, I want to parse like 200-page PDF, then it's time for
Yeah,
me to build a ground-up solution. So I'm not paying a ton of data.
of course. Yes. And obviously, with all these new AI tools, where do you see things moving? Because obviously, everybody's worried AI is going to replace everything, coders, etc. Do you feel that this is true, or do you feel also that there's some things that actually are going to grow in value, like certain skills?
So in terms of, I don't think our jobs, in my opinion, from 2022 to today have already shifted a lot for, let's say, somewhere between like 10 to 25% of folks.
Hmm.
I think one of the biggest differences in 2025 and 2024 I'm noticing is that um, folks are now really realizing the value of using AI tools and the savings of it. Now their question is more like, okay, which tools do we use internally? Do we build this internally? Do we just outsource this to someone else? Do we outsource the services? Who can upskill us on this? That sort of thing.
Hmm.
So if that trajectory were to continue, what I envision happening is that yes, there's going to be less people doing redundant work, but I do genuinely think that there'll be new people who will be doing more work. So, or new types of work. So an example of this is Bloomberg used to have a dedicated sales training team within the sales team. And when I was in technical support, we also had a technical training team within the technical support team.
Hmm.
And the sales training team, as you can imagine, like one of the strengths of Bloomberg Salesforce is that like it had a very diverse background. There were a lot of bankers, a lot of former S&T folks, a lot of ingrown Bloomberg folks like myself, a lot of technical folks like myself, and there was other folks like they don't know a single line of code. So a sales training force was very helpful because I learned how to sell at Bloomberg, right? So like I just
Yes.
need to be upskilled in selling. I can 100% envision the equivalent of that within major organizations for AI upskilling. An
Mm.
entire workforce for the HR team, like a team of five, a team of 10 of folks that are just AI upskilling. So when
Yes.
Rippling comes out or Gusto comes out or someone else comes out with a new AI tool, they're the main liaison between those teams and helps upskill them on these new aspects, and et cetera. So I definitely envision that.
Mm. It's very interesting because obviously that has implications for my, I will say, final two-part question. For somebody, let's say, between 18 to 25, entering the space of work, obviously, and they want to actually upskill, become, how should I say it in a nice way, contributors to society. But obviously, let's say you're a computer programmer or computer scientist, how you going to fit into this framework? Like, obviously, because that's going to become quite difficult. And obviously, do you have a certain advice you can like to give them? Because obviously, I think, as you mentioned, certain jobs are also going to change significantly.
So 10 years ago, when I graduated from college, if you had a CS degree, you were basically like the cool kid, especially at Cornell. Like you were the
Yes.
cool kid on campus, bar none. Like you could have had a 2.5 GPA, and you were still the cool kid on campus.
Hmm.
And I think the unfortunate thing about having choosing degrees kind of as a guaranteed return on your investment is that it could be that you have the opportunity to be a very good orator and you could be a politician, or let's say you
Yes.
could be an extremely good salesman, but because it just so happens that you're pretty good at coding, you decided to go into coding. So I think what is transitioning, what I would recommend any 18 to 21-year-old right now is really double down on what you're really good at, what you know is like your God-given talent, and align yourself with a major that gives you opportunities for that. So let's say, for example, you're 16, you're 17, you have the opportunity to be like a really good streamer. Let's say you're a Twitch streamer, you love playing video games every single day. And you're very outgoing, etc. I always recommend folks like if you already like speaking to people, having a career in sales is one of those like direct careers that makes perfect sense. And although there isn't normally like an undergraduate major for sales, like something as simple as on like an accounting degree or like a finance degree or somewhere where like it's like Cornell had like IT degrees, for example. So instead of you fully being, let's say, like a computer science major, you would be like a computer science, I think it was like information technology major. So that gives you the opportunity to you can be a solutions architect one day. You could be a
Yes.
data engineer one day. Like, and those are folks that 100 million% will be employed in the future. A junior front-end engineer in 5 years, do I think that's going to be something that we commonly looked upon on LinkedIn? No, just let's be completely frank. But a someone who has a very good idea for, let's say, design for front engineering, or can help a swarm of agents iterate through different front engineering designs and point into the right direction or something along those lines. I think younger folks are going to have much more of like a managerial aspect to their
Mm-hmm.
career because a lot of the junior things have been automated, which allow
Yes.
them to empower themselves and have agency. So that's going to be a massive one. That's what I would recommend.
Oh, perfect. I think that's a very good advice. And I agree with it that sometimes it's difficult, like you said, when you study something because you think you're good at it as a degree, but then consequently you felt your interest lie elsewhere. So I think it's perfectly normal for people to change careers. And obviously, this is one of the topics in my obviously this episode series because I've spoken to many people who've changed careers. I've spoken to people who've gone from audit to software engineering or the other way around. It's very unusual, but also it tends to happen. And I think in this day and age, the estimate is that people will have at least 6 different careers throughout their life. At least that's the bottom end. So it's going to be very interesting to see how things develop. But thank you for that advice, Guillermo. I think it's very useful. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you, Alex.
And on this note, I would like to thank Guillermo for taking the time. I think a lot of people find his answers quite useful. I certainly did. And thank you again. And I really appreciate you taking the time.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. Cheers. Thanks,
Cheers.
everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bye. And to listeners, hope to see you again in our next episode. Thank you.